Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back because today I'm going to continue my series of Star Wars reviews leading up to the release of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So today is episode 5, and we are going to be talking about the middle chapter of the prequel trilogy, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, before we get started, I'm going to remind you all that this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, go watch it on Disney Plus or somewhere else you can find it, and then see yourself right back here. And with that said, let's get started. Set 10 years after the events of the Phantom Menace, the Republic continues to be in battle with the separatist movement led by Count Dooku. However, an assassination attempt on Padme's life leads to Anakin Skywalker going off to protect her as Anakin and Padme develop a romance between one another. While Obi-Wan tries to find this assassin, he discovers of a clone army being created, which leads to the beginning of the Clone Wars. As this is the middle chapter of the prequel trilogy, it's supposed to continue what the Phantom Menace left off and build upon it so that I can continue to tell the story about Anakin as he rises as a Jedi and so as fall to the dark side. And it is safe to say that this is by far my least favorite Star Wars movie in both the prequel trilogy and so as in the entire saga as a whole. I think it brings back a lot of my problems with the Phantom Menace and doubles down upon all of it. And once again, there's great ideas to be had here, but they're ruined by poor execution and dialogue that's even worse than what came out of the Phantom Menace. So to kick things off, the positives, I think Ewan McGregor is once again great as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I like his presence, and I like his dynamic with Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, and I like seeing a much older Obi-Wan who is not the Jedi Knight this time, but more of the Master in this case, even though he's still a Jedi Knight in a sense. But I really like him, and I think his storyline with the Clone Army, I think, is really fun to watch. It's not amazing. It's not the best story ever told in the saga, but it's watchable. I think the ideas of it are great, and seeing him try to discover this conspiracy about the Clone Army, and so as him trying to find the assassin who tried to kill Padme, I think it's a watchable story. It's not perfect, but out of all the storylines that are at play in this movie, that's by far the most watchable part of it. The second thing I love here is, once again, John Williams has an excellent score with one of my favorite tracks in Star Wars being Across the Stars, which is the love theme between Anakin and Padme. Really love that theme. It really symbolizes and details the romance between one another, while also showing the perils of what is to come with war and the battle, and that they can't be together because of the Jedi Code, and so as her role as senator. And so, really great theme. The dual theme with confrontation with Count Dooku and end credit scene, that's a great theme as well. There, once again, John Williams does not miss. And like I said in the previous review, every single time I'm going to do a Star Wars movie review, the pro of this will always be a score by John Williams, because he always delivers his 110% every time he composes. So to kick off the story, Padme was involved in an assassination attempt. Somebody tried to kill her, and so Anakin reunites with her for the first time in 10 years since the end of the Phantom Menace, as Anakin and Obi-Wan have had 10 years of experiences where Anakin's grown as a Jedi and as a Padawan, and they try to find this assassin who tried to kill Padme, and it leads to a whole chase sequence on Coruscant, where the context of it is cool. There's some funny moments here and there, especially Anakin jumping off the speeder as he falls, such a big drop on Coruscant, and so as some moments between the two of them and the chase. The context of it is fine. What really bugs this scene and really bogs it down is that the CGI here looks like it came out of a video game. And the Phantom Menace also had visual effects that at times looks really great, but at times doesn't hold up to today's standards. Here it's worse because there are a lot of visual effects that feel like they do not hold up by today's standards. And out of all the Star Wars movies we've ever had, I don't think the visuals here are quite up to par with even what we got in Phantom Menace. Because while we do have some good visual effects here, they're just as good as some of the best visual effects shots in Phantom Menace. But there is a lot of very wonky CGI, especially with CG characters and CG backdrops and everything like that. And so they try to find this assassin, and they did. And the assassin gets killed. and then it sends off this whole storyline with Anakin and Padme as they go to Naboo so that Anakin can protect her, so that Obi-Wan and the Council can try to find the assassin who tried to kill Padme. And so it leads to this whole storyline where Anakin and Padme are starting to fall for each other, despite knowing that the Jedi Code forbids this, and that as a senator, this would not look good on her. And I think Natalie Portman's a great actress. I think Hayden Christensen, even in Revenge of the Sith, I actually think he's really good in Revenge of the Sith. But here, their relationship storyline is very awkward, and it just does not feel very well executed. So it makes a lot of their scenes just hard for me to tolerate. Again, there are great ideas to be had here. I think I got the point that was trying to be thrown across with the romance storyline here, because without those two, what happens to Luke and Leia? Because we need to let this stuff happen so that what happens in the original trilogy can occur. But the way it's done here feels very cringeworthy. There's some really weird lines of dialogue, and even if there are very memeable moments,
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
I hate it when he does that.
Impossible. Perhaps the archives are incomplete. That's why I'm here.
Pack your things. We're leaving.
Oh, not good.
a lot of the dialogue for the most part still feels very weird, awkward, cringeworthy, and it's just not good. And it just makes it feel a little bit harder for me to take any of this seriously, because a lot of the way these things are delivered to us is just weird to me. And it also is just even more weirder is the fact that whenever you have a new scene on Naboo with Anakin and Padme's in more revealing clothes every single time. It just makes this relationship weird, because knowing how they met in Phantom Menace when she was already like a teenager around that point, and then you got Anakin, who's just a 9-year-old boy, and now 10 years later is this, and it's just awkward because the way it was delivered. And I didn't feel as much chemistry between Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. And that's not like a knock on either of them. I think both of them tried with what they were trying to do, but sometimes the lines that they were delivered to them and just what they had to do, I think they did not have great material to work with at all. And it makes the romance storyline probably one of the more boring parts of this movie. And this is by far the slowest paced Star Wars movie. Even though Phantom Menace had the Tatooine segment of the movie, which really just slows the movie down by 40 to 50 minutes, at least everything else outside of that is well paced. And I was still slightly engaged with the current situation over there. Here, it doesn't even pick up a lot until Obi-Wan fights Jango Fett in the climax, well, not climax, but the middle of this movie. And it's a really slow movie, and it feels like there's not as much exciting things happening here to get my attention to the screen. And it really bums me out to say this, because great ideas, and there are things about this movie that I do think are really good. But as a whole, this movie is not as good as it could have been. So while Anakin and Padme have their romance storyline in this movie, we go back to Obi-Wan's storyline, and we see that he goes to Kamino to find his bounty hunter, and then he goes there. And Kamino is a cool planet, not gonna lie. I think just the look of it, I think is cool. I think the idea of that being where the clone army is created, the visual look of it is impressive for what is probably one of the better visual aspects of this movie. And I do think that that aspect of the movie is interesting to say the least, where Obi-Wan finds out that, like, oh, a Jedi Master Sifo Dyas commissioned a clone army here, but then Obi-Wan's like, but he's dead. And leads to this mystery surrounding who commissioned this clone army, who created this, what's going on here. And I think that's really cool. And the idea of this bounty hunter that Obi-Wan then is chasing being the one that just embodies all these clones, like all the clones come from him, I think good idea. I think Temuera Morrison is good as this character as Jango Fett, and I think it's awesome that he got to play Boba Fett in The Mandalorian, and so is the Book of Boba Fett. So it's awesome to see, like, this is where he joins the franchise, and that even in here in Revenge of the Sith, he gets to come back for the Disney Plus side of things. So I think he's good here as Jango Fett and all these other clones in this movie. And I do think that the fight between Obi-Wan and Jango is really cool to watch. I think I love that Obi-Wan is not relying as much on his lightsaber to fight somebody like Jango, but rather he's using his body and some of his abilities without the lightsaber to do so, even though he does use it at times. But it's a cool sequence. One of the best parts about this movie. It's a cool visual fight sequence to say, and I do think just what happens there, it's cool. There are some funny moments there where Obi-Wan's just getting shot at, and he's not taking as much damage. He doesn't seem like he's as badly injured by it, especially when you're getting like blasters on the ship shooting at you. But nevertheless, it's a great moment, by far one of the best sequences to come out of the film. And then Jango Fett and his son Boba, they escape Kamino, and then Obi-Wan chases them into an asteroid field where they go to Geonosis. Now, the only other Star Wars movie to have an asteroid chase sequence like this is The Empire Strikes Back. And The Empire Strikes Back, it's so great because there's tension, and for the visuals, it really holds up for that time frame. And that because I was able to connect with those characters a lot and the situation at hand, I was a lot more invested in there. Here, the only character I'm really invested in is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And a lot of these asteroids and the effects here don't quite hold up as well to this day. And while there are some cool moments that come out of that asteroid chase sequence, I'm not feeling as much danger or a sense of urgency to really feel like Obi-Wan is in danger here, or even Jango Fett in them. And that is also a problem I have with the entire film as a whole. I don't feel as much danger because I'm not as connected to these characters like I was with the original trilogy. So despite the situations that happened here, I've only really felt danger a few times in this movie. But in that asteroid chase sequence, even though there are some cool moments, I'm not feeling as much weight behind any of it. And then Obi-Wan lands on Geonosis, and it leads to another issue I have with this movie, where he sends a transmission signal to Anakin Padme to let the Jedi know about this, and he also sends one to even Yoda and Mace Windu. One of the biggest problems here is the Jedi are being a bunch of idiots in this movie. You have Yoda and Mace Windu and the entire Jedi Council, and when Obi-Wan tells them that a clone army is being commissioned, without them knowing about this, what do they do to investigate this? They just sit around the Jedi Temple doing nothing. And they let Obi-Wan do all the hard work. And it's just like, the Jedi are supposed to be like warriors who fight for peace. And they're supposed to just, why aren't they investigating this? Because this is something supposed to be big. How did they not know a clone army is commissioned? And how would they not do anything about this? Because of how this is a big thing right here. And they just don't do anything. Obi-Wan sends them a transmission. They find out about this. And they just sit around not doing anything about it. It's just so many things in the movie the Jedi should have had more involvement in. But they don't. They just let Obi-Wan and even Anakin do this whole thing all of them by themselves. It wasn't, the Jedi don't really get into all of this until the Battle of Geonosis occurs in the climax. And they could have done a much better job with that, with the Jedi in this movie. And then some of the rules of the Jedi Code are so questionable, to say the least. But that's one thing. There are just logic issues I have discovered in the movie, like, why don't the Jedi just do something about this when they got these transmissions that, oh, clone armies created, Count Dooku, why didn't they realize Count Dooku was behind all this? It's just, they don't do anything. And it just feels kind of weird to me. It's like, why would they do nothing about stuff like this? And then we go back to Anakin and Padme, and because Anakin's starting to have nightmares and visions about his mother Shmi, who's in danger, they go to Tatooine, which means they leave their post. They leave what the Republic and the Jedi are requesting Anakin to do so they can go find his mother. And I do think it's nice to go back to Tatooine again. They're not in there for as long as, say, Phantom Menace, but we also got to see the Lars homestead, which is really cool. First time since A New Hope. And I do think there's some aspects to it I think are really good. We got introduced to a younger Owen and Beru Lars who end up raising Luke Skywalker, and so as like Anakin and Padme, they go through Tatooine to be like, where is my mother? Where is Shmi? And they go to Watto. We see Watto again. Watto ends up revealing that he sold her to the Lars family, and then they meet the Lars family. and we find out that Shmi's been taken by Tusken Raiders. And it leads to a cool visual sequence where Anakin goes off on a speeder to find his mother and the Tusken Raiders. That is actually a cool visual moment in the movie, where we see Anakin, he's on the speeder, and I love the visual background of everything on Tatooine as he tries to find his mother. And just the length he goes to get there, I think is cool. It's just him speeding through all this territory on Tatooine. It's a cool moment. And it leads to another one of the best scenes in this movie, and probably the best scene that Hayden Christensen did in the movie, where he finds Shmi and saves her, but Shmi dies, and Anakin is full of rage and anger, and he decides to, out of anger, because his mom is dead, and that the Tusken Raiders have captured and tortured her. It was a nice and really good moment in this movie where Anakin takes out his lightsaber and he starts killing all the Tusken Raiders as an act of revenge for what they did to his mother. There's a cool theory I've heard about this where Count Dooku or Palpatine are behind this, and if that is the case, I think that would really add more layers to Anakin and Dooku's rivalry they've had, not in just this movie, but so as in the Clone Wars, which really elevates that moment in Revenge of the Sith in the opening. This isn't confirmed. I could imagine this, but I think that theory could actually be really cool, especially as later on we see Dooku and he's revealed to be the main villain of this movie. The only downside I have to the scene is it's so short, because once he starts really killing the Tusken Raiders, it cuts away to what's happening at the Jedi Temple. And that's a bummer, because this is a great scene. I think Hayden really showcases the anger through his eyes and just all that rage inside of him. He just unleashes it all. That it's a bummer that they just cut away from all that, because that was a great moment. And like I said before, Count Dooku's the main villain of this movie. He's played by Christopher Lee. Also one of the acting highlights of this movie. And what I didn't like is that a character like him gets introduced so late into this movie, because out of all the Star Wars movies, this one doesn't have as much tension. There's not as much going on in this movie to have me feeling like I'm on the edge of my seat. Because an hour and 16 minutes into the movie, we finally meet our main villain, and that he is behind the separatist movement. He's the leader of all this, and he's like a Sith Lord. And they captured ObiWan and them, and so Anakin Padme returned to the Lars homestead, where they revealed to the Lars family that Shmi is dead. And then Anakin, Padme, 3PO, and R2 head off to Geonosis to go save Obi-Wan. Now, the downside of this moment as well is that now we're starting to get a sense of urgency here. Obi-Wan's been captured, and it also leads to a moment where he and Dooku talk with one another, that he revealed to Obi-Wan that, what if I told you there is a Sith Lord in the Senate? And it just makes it frustrating that the Jedi are being kind of ignorant to all this, because he tells them this. Dooku's not really a liar kind of character from what I can remember. I haven't seen all the Clone Wars, but he reveals to them, what if I told you the Sith Lord Darth Sidious is in the Senate? And all of these things. He was warning the Jedi about so many things and was giving them info about so many things. And what does Obi-Wan do? But also, what does everyone else do? They turn a blind eye to it. They deny all of it like it ain't true. And when you watch Revenge of the Sith, it really makes you look at them just like, why? They made the Jedi so ignorant and so ridiculous. It's like, aside from Obi-Wan, who's safe, why are you not making the Jedi do more in this story when they could be? And it really sticks out like a sore thumb when I watch this movie. It's like, Dooku tells them this, and they don't do much to this, and that's it. It's a throwaway line, which is supposed to build something, gives them ideas of something regarding Darth Sidious. They don't explore much about it until really Revenge of the Sith. And then another moment in this movie that's just ridiculous is because Padme goes off into hiding with Anakin protecting her, she lets Jar Jar take her place in like the Senate meetings and her role. And they decide to give Chancellor Palpatine all emergency powers, which basically means Jar Jar is the one responsible for Order 66 that ends up happening 3 years from now. And all the stuff that Palpatine's able to do is all because of Jar Jar, because Jar Jar gave him all emergency powers. Like, I bestowed Chancellor Palpatine all emergency powers. And for somebody who doesn't really like Jar Jar as a character and character alone, that's frustrating to me. You have a character who I just do not care for in Phantom Menace. So thankfully they reduced his screen time in this movie. He does this. It is such a logic error. And it just, I get they don't know that he's a Sith Lord, but for some character like Jar Jar Binks to be the one to grant him all the powers, it's just like, that's just not a good idea. I did not like that idea. For the way for him to get emergency powers is from Jar Jar being the one to bestow it all upon him. That just, it's just not a good moment. It's not only is it not a good moment, but it just makes me dislike Jar Jar as a character even more. Again, nothing against the actor. He did good with what he had to do. It's just the writing for his character is just so ridiculous to me that they do this. Jar Jar is the one responsible for the downfall of the Jedi. So then Anakin, Padme, and them, they're on Geonosis now, and they try to save ObiWan. They go through this droid factory, and you see Anakin use his lightsaber, twirl it around, take on these separatist droids and all these creatures that are there trying to attack him, and the whole Padme thing. It's a fine sequence. Again, nothing too mind-blowing, nothing bad or anything. It's an all-right sequence for what it is. They get captured, and then we have the arena sequence on Geonosis where Anakin and Padme get taken onto an arena, and they reunite with Obi-Wan in this movie where Count Dooku and the separatist leaders watch them as they plan to execute the three of them. And as a visual sequence, there are noticeable CGI here, but the third act is by far the best part about this entire film. I like that Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme, they are able to do something to get out of being chained to a post that they're tied to, and they take on these creatures. It's a fine moment, and then Mace Windu and Yoda and the rest of the Jedi, they finally do something in this movie. They come to Geonosis to tell Dooku the party's over, and they attempt to defeat Dooku. They come on in there, and then a big fight ensues and it leads to the Battle of Geonosis. One of the things that's actually really cool about this movie is that, unlike a majority of the other Star Wars movies, this is one of the rare instances in the movies where we actually see a ton of Jedi all in a location. We see them in Geonosis. The Battle of Geonosis is a really cool sequence. I do admit, I love seeing all these Jedi in a room, from Anakin to Obi-Wan to Mace Windu to Yoda to Kit Fisto. It's an awesome scene. You have all these characters taking on droids, taking on the separatists. It's a really cool moment. Then you get Mace Windu with his lightsaber. He beheads Jango Fett after Jango Fett does a few things there. And it's still funny to me how Mace Windu just looks down upon the fact that I beheaded Jango Fett, and he's just like, he gives the look. It's a funny moment for a moment like that, and which really kickstarts Boba Fett's role in the Clone Wars, where he wants to kill Mace Windu, and he descends into madness because of Mace killing Jango. And when it looks like they're all surrounded, you have all those droids, and it looked like the Jedi were doomed. And then the clones finally show up in this movie to attack the droids. They come in to save the Jedi because the clone army is commissioned for the Jedi. And this is another weird thing, is that the movie's titled Attack of the Clones, but they've only really attacked once in this movie. That's like saying, let's call Star Wars Revenge of the Sith like the Battle of Mustafar, which is only really one sequence or two in like the climax. And that's just such a weird title for this movie, because while the clones, that area of the movie, is an important part about this movie, they don't really come into battle until the Battle of Geonosis. So it's weird that this is the title of the movie. It feels more fitting to call this movie Star Wars Shroud of the Dark Side, like what Yoda said in the end of this movie. That felt more fitting. So that's just a weird issue I had with this movie. Even though it's not as big of an issue, it's still one I've had nonetheless. But the clones come in. They come in to save the Jedi and all that stuff. Again, it's a cool moment. when it looked like the heroes were doomed, the clones finally come in, and this is what sets up the Clone Wars that ends up happening. And Anakin and Obi-Wan, they try to find Dooku, and we have an encounter with Dooku. Now, out of all the 3 lightsaber climaxes in this movie between Duel of the Fates, this, and Battle of the Heroes, this is by far the weakest one because it feels way too short, and there's not as much going on here. John Williams' score here is good. I liked seeing Anakin and Obi-Wan finally back together in this movie after being separated for too long, and seeing them fight Dooku. I think seeing Anakin use 2 lightsabers to fight Dooku, I think is really cool. Seeing Obi-Wan fight Dooku even was really cool. But it's too short of a sequence, and then they both get beaten pretty quickly. And then, just like how Luke lost his hand to Vader in Empire, Count Dooku chops off Anakin's hand in Attack of the Clones, which is a nice, neat little detail. It's nothing too mind-blowing, even though it's like, hey, Luke lost his hand, and so does his father. So that happens, and then Yoda comes in and battles Count Dooku. And it's a cool sequence. CG Yoda doesn't look as good as puppet Yoda like in the original trilogy, but it was cool to see Yoda in action for a bit and seeing him fight Count Dooku, because Yoda is actually the master of Count Dooku when he was a Jedi. And it's a cool little sequence, and then Count Dooku gave him a choice. You either catch him or you save Anakin and Obi-Wan, and so he chose to save Anakin and Obi-Wan, then Dooku gets away. And then it sets up the ending of the movie where Dooku retreats to Coruscant into a base where he finds Darth Sidious and tells him how everything is apparently going to plan, and that they've apparently, what they've done is good for what's going to come later. And you see Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Yoda in the Jedi Council chamber, and they discuss how it's like, oh, Obi-Wan, do you think this is a victory? Because the Shroud of the Dark Side is fallen, but the Clone Wars is about to begin. And then that's the last line to cap off this movie, because now, after all the stuff that's happened in this movie, it finally ends where the Clone Wars begins. And you see all the clones and all of these ships, which kind of signals the beginning of the war. And you see all of them start to get dispatched somewhere. And then you look at the Palpatine and all the members of the Senate watching over it, knowing of what's to come, which gives you the idea that Palpatine's master plan is complete, because we all know where this is going to go. And then the final sequence in this movie is Anakin, Padme, they're on Naboo, and alongside C-3PO and R2-D2, they secretly get married, and nobody else knows about this, none of the Jedi, none of the Senate, nobody knew about this, so they get married in secret, and they look out into the sky from where they get married as they think about how the war has begun and just the looming presence of what's to come later now that the Clone Wars is officially started. And then Attack of the Clones comes to a close. Yeah, this is my least favorite Star Wars movie. There are some great moments again, like I love the fight between Obi-Wan and Jango. I love the scene with Anakin and his mom, and so as the Battle of Geonosis was really cool. But the fight with Dooku, I think, should have been a lot longer than it is. The pacing should have been a lot better. It had the weakest dialogue to come out of the movies. Great ideas, poor execution, and I think by far this is the least rewatchable Star Wars movie for me. But on the bright side, I have to at least give it credit that it gave us the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, which gave us a lot of exciting and awesome content to come out of this franchise. So even if this is by far my least favorite Star Wars movie to come out of the prequel trilogy, and so as what we get later on, this is by far my least favorite of the films, and it feels a lot more like a placeholder for Revenge of the Sith and more. So in the end, I'm going to give Star Wars Attack of the Clones a C-. If you're a fan of the Star Wars franchise, big or small, I think this movie is worth watching for you, because at least the movie continues the story left from the Phantom Menace and explores Anakin's descent to the dark side. And at least it expands the galaxy in a few ways, even if the ideas aren't always the greatest in execution. But if you're not a fan of Star Wars, then I don't think this movie's going to do much for you. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. What do you think of this movie? Do you feel the same as me, or do you actually appreciate this movie a lot more than I do? I'd love to hear it down below in the comments section, and stay tuned. I have a review for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith coming out soon. that I cannot wait to talk about with you guys, so I hope you guys will stay tuned for that. And don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below, so don't forget to do that while you're at it. And thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button, and stay tuned for more.
Oh, not good.